How is coronavirus impacting your job at the moment? I was living in Shanghai with a great job and a great apartment. I visited a friend for a last-minute vacation in Taiwan when the virus hit China really bad. My job shut down and I was told not to come back to the country. They stopped paying me salary and housing stipend, even though it's illegal, and I've been stuck in Taiwan ever since trying to start a new life. I essentially lost all my stuff as I couldn't pay for the apartment anymore. Need to resort to teaching English, temporarily, to survive here. No end in sight and not sure what my future holds. It's a scary time and has been a rough month. Goddamn, that sucks. I feel your pain, dude. I was out on assignment for the company and they fired me for not showing up to the office. Well, no shit. I was out on assignment for the company. They cancelled my flight, hotel, and company credit card. It was like they sent me on the assignment specifically to strand me in another country. Sued them and it took forever to get money back. I basically had a reset on my life. And this was in the US. I can't imagine how little protections you'll get having to fight China. I work for Starbucks. We are no longer making drinks in personal cups and we have a timer set for every 30 minutes to tell everyone to wash their hands. Starbucks doesn't have those timers normally. I used to work fast food and those timers were a standard. There are timers for when to change sanitizer and get clean pitchers and bar parts, but no. There hadn't been one specifically for hand washing. I work retail. We're out of paper towels, wet wipes, hand sanitizer, toilet paper, and water. We're also quickly running out of baby food, canned goods, cereals, and bleach. I've also had some old boomer tell me she hopes I catch coronavirus and die because I couldn't magically pull a bottle of Germ-X out of my ass for her to buy. I work in the hotel industry. My hotel has lost hundreds of thousands of dollars of revenue between cancellations of leisure travel and business travel. We've seen cancellations all the way through June-July. We were tracking for a huge Q1 but now everything is up in the air. We're having to shuffle labor so some of our hourly staff is losing shifts since we don't have the occupancy in the building to justify having the full staff in-house. It's a really scary time in my industry. All of the revenue managers in the city are having a collective panic attack. I went on holiday to Asia and my boss told me not to come to work for 3 weeks. Even though financially I'm screwed, these 3 weeks have been bloody marvelous. We got a message on the portal that sums down to, wash your hand you dirty ducks. I work in healthcare in an area that's had an outbreak. It is certain I will be getting the virus. Just a matter of when. I'm so sorry. Thank you for putting yourself at risk to care for others. My heart breaks for all of those affected. I live in rural Michigan and work just over the border in Indiana. And so far the only thing that has changed is gas prices have gone down to just over $2. I live in California and the twin ports of LA and Long Beach are kind of in a shutdown. Customs is slowly inspecting container ships and that's creating a ship backlog. There's talks about a nationwide recession due to the slowdown at the ports. I'm a nanny in Seattle. Both parents are working from home so the house has been chaos. I can't take the little one to all the usual activities so he's getting cabin fever. Bright side. My hour commute has been reduced to 35 minutes because everyone else is working from home and there's no traffic. I work in a hospital. An email went out today telling us to involve the minimum number of staff for any patient on droplet airborne precautions, no students, scribes, etc. to conserve mask supplies. They usually turn a blind eye to staff taking supplies home, but they're threatening disciplinary action now for anyone who takes masks sanitizer. Someone stole the sanitizer off the secretary's desk today. We're encouraged to have a low threshold for calling in and use telemedicine when appropriate instead of coming to a doctor's office. They'll advance us 2 weeks of PTO if we don't have any. Which is all well and good. But they're not giving extra to us. Just advancing it. And I'd much rather use PTO for vacation, so it's kind of a bummer since I'll almost definitely get it. Web developer at an office. So far no impact at all. I also write software and my office already has contingency plans for everyone to work at home for a few weeks if necessary. I already work at home 80%. So not that big of a change for me. I wish we could do that. Stupid Cisco licensing limits on VPNs. We're currently working with CDW to upgrade. But it's taking a while. Apparently they're overloaded with other people doing the same. My dad is having a hard time cause he works in the airport and because of lot travel numbers they are removing overtime pay. My ex-husband works at an airport. I deeply appreciate the fact that he doesn't come into my house anymore. I'm immunocompromised when he drops off the kid. He just parks in the driveway and tells son to go inside and wash his hands. When we have to talk, we do it on the phone. He doesn't want any airport related cooties to get on me. I work as a restaurant server in 2 different casinos. We get a lot of traffic from states with confirmed outbreaks, but since it's a kitchen food environment it's basically just make sure you're washing your hands and following the safety guidelines you should be following every day anyways. And please don't come in sick. Which you shouldn't do anyways. Honestly all we have is some more signs on the wall telling people to hand wash. And a few sanitizing stations set up by doorways. The only other place I've noticed its effect in my town is the local bulk barn isn't letting people bring their own containers. Which is one of the biggest points of shopping there. Seems a bit useless as well when every customer has to use the same metal scoop to fill up their product bags anyway. My boss's girlfriend works as a travel agent. He says usually in February they do around $1 million in sales. This year they barely did 500k. I'm actually surprised they got that much tbh. Anecdotally, my fiance and I had a trip planned to go to Italy in April. We had to cancel due to obvious reasons. This made us reach out to our travel agent to book a new trip somewhere else. If that new destination gets hit, we will rinse and repeat the process. I assume our second trip would be considered new business and add to February's sales numbers. I teach at a school. And we've received notices from superintendent's office as to what precautions to take. And to stay home if you're running a temperature. We're also getting disinfectant bottles and hand sanitizer, though obviously in short supply at the moment. I think it's been mentioned. But to reiterate, the concern is for those who are immunocompromised, as well as those at either extreme of the age spectrum. Taking basic, simple precautions will go a long way. Just because it isn't the plague or SARS doesn't mean it won't affect you or those you love. Don't freak out, but don't act like it's nothing. Just be mindful and take sensible steps to ensure you're safe, as well as others. Honestly, if I found out I had it but didn't heed any of the warnings, or went about my day without a concern, and then heard that one of my students' grandparents or infant sibling had contracted it and was fighting for their lives, I'd be devastated. I'm a software developer, so no real change here. But I was scheduled to go to a conference at the end of the month. But company has cancelled travel even though the conference is still going on. Seafood. Some prices dropped due to decreased Chinese demand and import problems. Live lobsters and salmon. The Boston Seafood Show was cancelled. Japanese fish are hard to come by. I'm terrified to go to work. I work retail. We have hundreds of people coming in and out every day. People sneeze and cough and don't even attempt to cover their mouths, and if I say anything to them, I could get in trouble. I had to have someone in produce pull a bunch of apples the other day because there was a kid just standing there coughing on them and his parents just let him. And we can't use doctor's notes as excuses. If we get sick, we have to come in or risk losing our jobs. I hate this company. The stock market is ducking wild. It really is. My boss sold everything Tuesday before last, then bought again Monday morning, then sold it all at the end of the day, then bought Wednesday morning, then sold Wednesday afternoon. He make 50% on his money in only a little more than a week, so he's in a damn good mood. I'm one of 3 doctors that own a practice in the US. We had a meeting to determine that if we shut down for weeks when this gets to our section of the Midwest, Do we pay the employees? We all decided yes. So we are all putting more money in savings so our 34 employees still get full payroll even if we close. If we close, no inflow of money to the practice. So the money has to come from somewhere. So much for getting ahead on my student loans. But I'm pretty sure 2-3 weeks of no pay will hurt my staff more than it would hurt me. I bet the local hospital will just screw over their staff and send them home without pay. Holy shit, is it annoying. I work in the HR industry and all I've done this week is write articles, blog posts, and emails about how to treat your employees during the pandemic and what your policies should look like. I love that my company is providing good and helpful guidance for people. But boy howdy am I ready to be done talking about it. The coronavirus isn't impacting my job because I don't have one, but it is impacting my parents' job. We live in Hong Kong and my parents own a security tech factory in mainland China. They can't go to the factory to do work, but they also have an office in Hong Kong where they can work. One of their workers came back from Wuhan but didn't quarantine herself and went to work anyway. My parents found out and their office had to be shut down temporarily. They couldn't work so they couldn't make money for the family. But the thing was, my mum was the boss, so that meant she still had to pay workers even though they aren't working. So basically my family is losing more and more money every day and we have no way of getting more money until the government decides it is safe for the office to reopen. I haven't seen my parents so stressed out in my entire life. Every time I see them they are either on their computers sending emails and writing documents or on the phone talking to government officials. I haven't seen them in a good mood or relax in a while and I'm starting to really worry about them. The worst thing was, the worker knew all this was going to happen. She just didn't care. My parents said the office should reopen sometime within the next few days, so hopefully everything will be okay soon. Edit. Good news. The day after I posted this the office reopened, so everything is going to be okay. As a web developer I now have to limit the amount of users accessing the website at the same time to decrease the chance of infection. While this is pretty annoying, it also eliminates scalability as a requirement. Yes. I'm just kidding. Though, I wouldn't be too surprised if a customer actually came up with such a request. We now have a daily janitorial team whose number one priority is disinfecting door handles, water fountains, keyboards, screens. Basically anything people touch a lot. Also, if you have it or a family member has it but you don't have the sick time for it, then sick time will be given to you. Also, all travel and large gatherings are cancelled through the end of the month. The last one is kinda disappointing because there were events planned, but health safety is definitely more important. Not necessarily my job, but my school. I'm 17 and I go to high school in Washington State. There's been a lot of schools shutting down around us because of concerns or cleaning. I've been pushing through it. First case in our tiny town just got confirmed. It's definitely weird seeing our tight-knit community on the headlines of CNN. We've had letters sent home on COVID-19 and my astronomy teacher has been updating us every day, as his wife is an emergency room nurse. I know we'll shut down eventually, but it's just a matter of when. The atmosphere at school is a lot more subdued now. Everyone is being more cautious. Quite a few aren't even showing up anymore. It's just weird. Our inventory comes exclusively from China, but we're stocked up enough to not risk running out. Current orders are slightly more expensive, but our margins are good enough that we're just eating the extra expense and keeping our clients happy. Not too bad. All of our manufacturing comes from China. The only difference I've seen so far is that people don't pop the bubble wrap any longer. That was fun to do. So it's sad to have that fun taken away. International Business School. We have had to bring back students from countries where they are doing their obligatory year abroad or international internships. This week we announced the destinations to the first years. Obviously, anyone who chose China or Italy or South Korea is on a conditional shortlist. Our current interns are freaking out. One such student has had the craziest year of her life. Beginning a 6-month internship in California that was cut short by wildfires. Finding a new internship in Australia that ended after only a week because fires, but managing to transfer to Hong Kong for the remainder. She got out of Hong Kong to go back to California for some master's program, but now she is in quarantine in France. There is a crisis meeting every day at 4:30 about this situation. Seeing as how schools are beginning to close, there is a good chance that I might have a few weeks off in the future, which will be chaos for my employer. All sporting events are cancelled. All conferences cancelled. Some teachers are doing video lessons. No more handshakes. Cafeteria staff is down to about 60%. A few colleagues are on lockdown because they live in areas with multiple cases. TLD are trying to adapt, but we know that an international school is a virus playground. I've been a kindergarten teacher in Shanghai for the past 5 years. I went on a trip to Cuba for Chinese New Year, and by the time I returned, the infection rate was climbing dramatically and everyone here was in a panic. My kindergarten is closed indefinitely and my company has assigned us to online teaching, but it's a total mess and really disorganized. The city is slowly returning to normal. Businesses that haven't closed are resuming, albeit with reduced hours. And some companies are having workers come back in, but it still feels very eerie with the masks, restrictions and temperature checks everywhere. After being cooped up at home for so long, I'm starting to wonder if I should throw in the towel and return to my home country to seek out better options. Professional speaker in Europe. Conferences being cancelled all over the place. I've only lost 2 so far, but I'm waiting to see how many more companies decide to cancel. In many cases these are probably postponements and I'll get the work eventually. Many of my colleagues are in full panic mode. We are all self-employed. It is exposing the divide between people with high monthly overheads and low savings and people, like me, with deliberately low costs and high savings. I can afford to shrug and take personal time for a few months until things stabilize. Apparently the movie industry is going to lose a ton of money due to the virus, especially in areas where the virus hits hard. The theater chain I work for is already filing for bankruptcy. And if it hits our area, it could kill any chance of us recovering from it. I work at a company that does trade show booths. We have had many cancellations. One more as I was typing this. I have been looking busy for the last week or 2. And preparing to be laid off or have my hours cut severely for the foreseeable future until things get going. Just to walk through the front door you have to go through a screening process. We're doing the opposite. I work in a Microsoft building for a vendor. And security has stopped doing pat downs and has basically stopped searching bags. I don't know if they were given permission to stop, or they stopped on their own due to fear. We can't order surgical masks, so we are reusing them. We need surgical masks for actual surgery. Reusing them isn't that bad as we are protecting patients from things we breath out. And reusing them 2-3x isn't probably detrimental. Just annoying. Serious, sailors of Reddit, what is the most unexplainable thing you have witnessed out at sea? I was manning a 0.50 calories on my first cruise in the Persian Gulf. I stood 1 4-hour watch every day. And it was pretty monotonous. We saw plenty of Gulf wildlife, bright purple jellyfish, sea snakes, etc. But one day I saw a bloated cow carcass just floating in the water. We're 100 miles from shore, so it probably didn't float out. But the possibility existed. Until we saw the second one. Then the third. Then the fourth. And the fifth. At about 1,000 feet intervals. There were bloated cow carcasses forming a perfectly straight line that we followed for a pretty good while because we were also going that direction. Had to have been 2-3 dozen of them. There were some goats and dogs in there too. Maybe not supernatural or anything, but it was pretty ducking weird. Never seen anything like that before or since. Sailing off the coast of Florida in a submarine at periscope depth. We see a small fishing boat go by. The fishing boat slows down and on the emergency frequency channel we hear in a very southern twang, "Is that a submarine?" That must be a dang submarine. The man immediately strips completely naked and then displays his rear for all of us to see on the periscope. He slaps scissors a few times and then carries on with his day. During the night after leaving Djibouti, we noticed that a radar echo, probably a tanker, was behind us and was on a collision course. We changed direction almost unnoticeably, 1 degree every 5-10 minutes in order to not reveal we were aware of its presence. After 1 hour the echo radar was still straight behind us and getting closer. It was clear it was following us. So we let the tanker get closer and closer, until it was at 100 meters behind us. Then we turned abruptly, esquived, and navigate at full speed in the opposing direction. Since a tanker takes hours to do a complete turn, we were safe after that. We never saw it again. Why would this tanker followed us and wanted to harm us? We had absolutely no idea. At the time there was no pirate in the zone. Maybe it was a ghost tanker. 250 miles into the Gulf of Mexico on my dad's boat, 44 feet. We'd been out there a couple weeks. It was about 2 in the morning. Ocean was eerily glassy, nary a wave to be seen. When you're that far out, and it's that dark, and the seas are calm, it can be tough to tell when the sky stops and the horizon begins. The boat was equipped with a light beneath the diving board on the rear, aft, that illuminated maybe a 20-foot radius beneath and around the boat. I saw a black shadow beneath me, a silhouette of something large enough to dwarf the boat I stood on. Maybe it was the alcohol. But I don't recall feeling afraid, just curious. I stared at it while it shifted beneath the light for a solid few minutes. I sorta wished it would surface. But I guess part of me was glad that it didn't. It's not much. And it really could have been anything from a whale to a submarine. But it was still the strangest thing I can remember seeing. Edit. Clarification. We were sailing south on Lake Michigan with iron ore to Burns Harbor. It was around 2 o'clock. A blip on the radar and another and on and then right past us without any lights or sound. The thing was, the object after calculating its velocity was confirmed to be moving just below 2,500 miles per hour. This was a freaky moment because we couldn't think of anything that could move that fast on or just above water. I've told this story before on here, but it's been a while. So here goes. While standing a lookout watch at night on a patrol somewhere in the middle of the Bering Sea, I saw a light appear on the horizon. The light rose until I could tell through the binoculars that it was clearly a circle of light, a glowing orb of some sort. It rose quickly and steadily and hung in the air, motionless from my perspective, for a short period of time, but long enough for me to report the sighting and for folks on the bridge to puzzle over it. Then a few minutes later, it dropped quickly and was gone for good. So, 2 things we knew. 1. It was over the water. The nearest land in that direction was so far that the damn thing would have had to have been the size of Connecticut if it had shot up from land. 2. The United States government didn't have a clue what it was, or had no interest in telling us. It was weird. I do not believe it was extraterrestrial or the result of anything supernatural, but it was weird. My family and I were out sailing in Croatia in a rental boat. There had been some pretty bad weather the week before our arrival, but we had fortunately avoided the storms. However, one fateful day when we were casually cruising along the coast, we started noticing things in the water. We decided to check it out and found large chunks of debris floating around, including a cabin door with a small orange life vest resting on top of it. We were shocked and stuck around the scene for about 30 minutes, listening for sounds and checking out the things we could fish up. After concluding that it looked like it had been in the water for quite some time, we determined at least a month or 2, and after trying to call it over our radio, which turned out to not work, thanks rental boats, we decided to keep moving. But we couldn't quite shake off the feeling of dread after seeing that. The little orange life vest still haunts me. I'm not entirely sure what else we could have done since we had no way of communication with land and we were hours away from the nearest port. We have no idea what it was, what happened, or, well, anything else. I was on a 52-foot boat 20 miles off the coast of South Carolina at about 3 AM cruising at 25 kts when I was hit in the chest by someone large and alive. It knocked me clear of the helm and was stuck to my shirt. I was on the deck rolling around trying to get it off me in the dark. I got up, took my shirt off and stomped it until it stopped moving. I went down to the cabin to grab my flashlight and gun. When I got back to the helm I finally was able to see what it was. A huge bat. Its wingspan was 2 feet and it was still very much alive. It sat there for a minute and then flew off. I was bleeding and had to get rabies shots when I got home. It was nothing strange but still unexplainable. Seeing the stars while in the middle of the Atlantic with all lights on board off and a new moon. I don't mean a few miles off the coast either, I mean the closest I was to land was probably 400-500 miles. With literally no light pollution, it is like you are seeing one of those long exposure pics, but it's just something unreal. I live in Bermuda. About 10 years ago, our one and only power generating plant had a massive fire, plunging the whole island into blackout. That meant that other than the faint glow of a burning power plant, there were no lights within 700 miles of us. The skies were perfectly clear and there was no moon. It was like standing in outer space, the stars and sky were so visible. It was a special experience. My great-grandpa was a frogman, predecessor to the Navy SEALs and EOD, in the US Navy during World War II, and he claimed one day when he was on the deck of a ship before a mission, and he claimed that for a moment he saw thousands of hands reaching out of the water. A few hours later, while he was on shore, the ship was attacked and lots of sailors on the ship died. He didn't believe in visions and he always said it was because of the stress of running missions non-stop for the last month, but the rest of my family thinks he saw a few hours into the future. This will be buried, but whatever. Not me, but my father worked on an oil rig offshore in the Gulf of Mexico in the 80s. He said that on a couple of occasions he would see schools of barracuda making very strange and different but perfect shapes in the water. Shapes such as triangles, squares, rectangles, and even circles. He is an avid documentary watcher and says he's never seen anyone acknowledge or talk about it. No one will see this, so I'll just tell more of a light-hearted story. I'm sure you have heard of a flying fish before. I had too. I always thought that it was just like a misnomer. I thought maybe they just jumped really high so people thought they were flying. That notion shattered while boating around Destin, Florida, out in the Gulf, while traveling pretty dang fast on our fishing boat. I was amazed when my dad pointed out that there was a little flying fish keeping paces with us a few inches above the water. We were going pretty dang fast too. It hovered there for about a minute and then pulled ahead and dropped back into the ocean. Amazing little things. Not sure if this qualifies, but in school when I was 14 I was sailing on Carniston Lake in a 2-man sailboat. I was driving, and it was extremely choppy. We were going way too fast and I knew it was only a matter of time until we sank. The waves were terrifying, and I am not a fan of the water. In fact, I refused to go in a boat in an ocean outright. I was keeping it together for a while, but then I heard what sounded like an explosion, and a shock wave hit our boat, which turned the sail quickly, hitting me on the head. Time felt like it was slowing at this point, and my mate jumped straight off, and as I regained my senses I noticed that the boat was tipping a lot. It was about to capsize. I tried my best to turn it back the other way to level it out, but it tipped so much the sail touched the water and scooped it in, flinging me into the air, luckily away from the boat, because if I was under it I probably would have been killed. I surfaced and we held onto the edge of the capsized boat until help came about 20 minutes later. The wind was so strong, however, that the rescue boat almost sank as well, and we had to shovel water out of it as we went with paper coffee cups. Later I found out that a jet plane was doing maneuvers in the valley, and due to the poor visibility he went too low towards the lake and accelerated to pull away upwards, causing him to break the sound barrier at low altitude, which was what the explosion sound was. While serving the Persian Gulf aboard a destroyer, we were cruising our patrol zone on a clear calm day. No land in sight. We saw a waterspout. No clouds or any other weather disturbances. It towered into the sky and didn't really move but lasted for about 15 minutes then just dissipated. I once watched waterspout churn for about 20 minutes, long enough for me to play from 7th green to 10th fairway. It was at the edge of a front of dark clouds, reaching from the edge of the clouds to the ocean. Beyond the front was clear sky. But where I was it was ominously black beneath the darkened sky. One of those thunderstorm turned day to night kind of skies. The sun was obscured by the clouds. But the waterspout, being at the front, was backlit by the sun. The waterspout and the spray at the base was lit up like some kind of fantastic Christmas decoration. Almost otherworldly in its brilliance. It was an amazing, memorable sight. I took my boat out with my buddy. We headed out to Catalina Island. At about 6:30 in the morning 15 miles offshore or so we see a giant green flash come down from the sky in front of us. It was pretty big and bright in the sky and lasted for about 2 seconds and then it was gone. There's a military base on a different island further out but it didn't look military. We've never seen anything like it before or since. In the South Pacific I once saw a flash of green and purple erupt in the sky. I figured it was natural but a few guys freaked out. I've answered this before. But the stars. When you're 3 days from the nearest land. And it's a clear night. More stars than you could ever imagined. And enough shooting stars to make you run out of wishes. I guess not unexplainable but still really cool. I was once aboard a ship in Alaska which rammed a whale. Ship didn't even bump. We just cruised past it. Third-hand story from my time in the Coast Guard. A bit of a heartbreaker. So skip if you don't want the onions. Back before getting updated in the late 80s and early 90s, Fram. USCG Hamilton class cutters ACA 378s had Navy armament. 538 main gun. Torpedo tubes. And sonar. I talked with an old sonar tech who had been stationed on his first tour as in Street Ike. While patrolling in the Pacific they hit a baby whale cruising next to its mom. They had been going at a good clip so they couldn't slow down fast. Chunks of whale got flung up on the flight deck from the props. The sonar shack had to listen to the death of the baby whale and the cries of its mom. It messed up the crew for a while. Especially the sonar guys. Yes, my favorite question. I've posted this before. But on a Navy ship in the Bahamas at night we almost got hit by a waterspout. Came within about 20 yards. We couldn't do any maneuvering because of water depth. And then there was a moonbow. When the moon is so full and bright that it makes a grayscale rainbow. It was beautiful and I tried to get a photo of it but of course I didn't have proper camera equipment. My father was a subsea engineer. He had numerous tales about finding strange debris on the ocean floor. His most interesting story was from a trench inspection for a new pipeline. He was on board the submersible as it followed the freshly dug trench and they videoed the site. Suddenly the pilot spotted something. Slowed the sub. And shut down all the video equipment. He moved the sub to bring the lights on the skeletal remains of a human that had been clearly wrapped in chains. They hung there for a while in quiet observation. Then my dad asked the pilot, "Why did you shut down the video?" He replied, "Unless you want this entire project to be halted while a criminal investigation into the death of some stranger who likely died over 100 years ago. Best to leave what we have found down here and move on." Lazily sailing on a bright, sunny SoCal day. Light winds. No chop. Just wavelets and swells. Lost a wooden push broom off the stern of the sailboat. Saw it go over and start to float away. Glanced down at my feet. Glanced up and it was gone. It had instantaneously turned invisible. It most certainly did not sink, but though I thoroughly scanned the only area it could possibly be floating in. As my buddy brought us around in our tracks. It was nowhere to be found. Just gone. It really struck home the importance of mob, man overboard, drills and not taking your eyes off the person for even a fraction of a moment. And 2. Physically point at them with your arm extended until they're rescued. because floating objects really do disappear that fast. I have a good friend who I have been sailing with for years. I have a few stories with each of us, but my favorite is the story of how we met from his perspective. I was sailing off the coast of Washington just minding my own business when I see a mast sailing past me. Assuming I had just drank something that was messing with my head, so I peer over to take a look. And I see this fellow standing on the boom leaning against the mast with the deck completely below water. He just looks at me and says, "This looks worse than it is. But could you give me a lift?" And cracks this silly grin. In a long story short, I gave this nut job and his flooded Zodiac lift back to port. So yeah, the strangest thing I think I have ever met on the ocean has been myself. Though I is a close contender. Submariner here. And not my story, but it came from a retired submariner I work with. It's also not unexplainable because, you know, like science and stuff. Anyways, he told me about how they had just surfaced off the coast of Florida and he was in the bridge as lookout. There had been a lot of storms there recently which caused the unique conditions necessary to create Street Elmo's fire. Turns out it's not just a movie, but actually something pretty interesting. Plasma in the atmosphere due to high electric potential differences. Definitely worth looking into for anyone interested. I'm currently on a car carrier with shitty satellite internet in the middle of the Pacific. I found this thread a bit late, but something pretty unexplainable happened a couple years ago. I was 500 miles off LA headed to Honolulu on a container ship when the intermediate shaft decided to shear itself from the propeller and fall into the ocean. You know, the bit that connects from the outside of the ship to the propeller? It happened right at the start of my morning watch on the engine room. I got my coffee, checked some gauges, and then heard a loud boom. RPM shot through the roof and I hit the all-call alarm. We shut down the turbines and waited a week before the company sent a harbor tug to tow us back home. No one could explain how the shaft just sheared off like that. Best guess was either incorrect loading or shitty installation in the shipyard. Either way, it wasn't supposed to happen. Since I'm seeing Navy stories here, I'll relay one myself. On a guided missile frigate returning from the first Gulf War. We were literally in the middle of the Atlantic when a contact was reported of the STBD bow. It was very rough too, so imagine our surprise when as we drew closer, we could see a little, maybe 50 feet, sailboat. I mean, this was deep water, middle of the ocean, and there's this little sailboat. The small vessel hails us and requests assistance. As we get closer, we can see a little old man and his dog. On the radio, he asks if we have any cigarettes we could part with as he had run out. That's it. That's all he wanted. Literal middle of ducking nowhere. Deep ocean. No land for thousands of miles. Old man wanted some smokes. Yeah. We gave him several cartons. Some ship's swag, shirts, hats, etc. and sent him on his way. I was a commercial fisherman, so I have spent some significant time at sea. The thing that always weirded me out was the way huge parts of humanity were always left on shore. As soon as they were out of sight of judgment, boats would mount an illegal and torturous device called the crucifier to tear the heads off fish, saving one humane cut with the knife. And they would shoot seagulls with pistols off the back of the boat, just for sport. Sheet. I knew a guy who would attract pigeons with bait just so he could catch them, grab them by the head, and spin their bodies until they flew off of the head in his hand, spilling blood everywhere to the laughter of his shipmates. The weirdest thing about the sea is what isolation does to human beings. Sailing in the Gulf Islands of British Columbia. Doing our best to stay away from the Navy. They were running a cat and mouse type exercise at the time. Anyhow, we're sailing up towards our anchorage for the night. And coming towards us is this orange ball boy. The strange thing was that the boy was moving. And was moving against current and wind. Despite the Navy ships that were playing hide and seek with each other in the islands. There wasn't any around us at that point. Nor were there any other boats. My best explanation is that it was attached to an underwater autonomous vehicle or similar.